Hi guys, and welcome back to a new video. I'm Ollie and this is Turner's Workshop, and in this week's video I'm going to be attempting to restore this Hayter Harrier 41 lawnmower. Now these are pretty good quality lawnmowers, so it's a shame to see this one in this condition. It's obviously just been left outside for many years, and I can't imagine when this was last run. You see the pull cord's completely broken and the mechanism's failed. Yeah, that fuel is very stagnant in there, so we'll have to drain that out. I'm going to begin by giving this a thorough clean, so I'm going to take it outside and jet wash it all off, because currently we've got all these crispy leaves and mud in here, and there's all kinds of wildlife living inside this lawnmower. So let's go and get rid of that and give it a nice wash off. There we go, we've got a nice clean lawnmower to work on now. But before we go any further with the deck, I want to make sure that we can get this engine running, because without a nice working engine, it's a pretty useless lawnmower, isn't it? So I've got a brand new starter recoil to go on here, which was kindly sent to me from a company called Hayter Parts, and they're a really good parts website if you ever need anything for your lawnmowers. Check them out. And if you've got any questions as well, specific to your lawnmower, and you need to find out part information, email them, because they'll be able to help you out no end, as they did for me with this one. So I've got a brand new starter recoil here and a new air filter. I'm going to assume that the compression's okay on this lawnmower, and then we've got a spark, so we just need to work on the fuel system, take the carburettor off, give that a nice good clean, take the tank off, thoroughly clean it out, put some fresh fuel in, check the oil levels, and away we go. We should hopefully, fingers crossed, have a nice working lawnmower. These old Briggs & Strattons have got imperial nuts and bolts on them, so this requires a 5/16 socket, or you can get a flathead screwdriver on there. So let's just take the air filter cover off, and look at the state of that. I then unbolt the engine speed control cable and remove it from the top of the carburettor. This top panel can come off, and the filter housing. It's got 3 bolts in it, 2 of them secure it to the carburettor and 1 to the engine. There we go. Right, that needs a thorough clean. So we've got 2 3/8 bolts up in here to take the carburettor off, and then 1 up in here. Now going to remove the fuel line. Turns out it's easier to remove the fuel line while it's still bolted to the engine, so maybe do that first. Oh, spilling fuel everywhere. I then drain the tank out using this handy little pot. Let's remove the tank. It's just these 3 bolts in the top. And let's not forget this one down here. And now the tank can come off. Now I don't have a new gasket kit for this, so I'm not going to take the gaskets off, I'll just leave them in place. But we can clean all of this dirt off and then get it ready to go in the ultrasonic cleaner. I used some WD-40 to loosen up the dirt, and then a toothbrush just to remove the worst of it. This is a 1/2 inch socket on the bottom. We've got that little washer there, and then the main jet is actually pretty clean. Wow, I wasn't expecting that. Okay, might be another issue with this lawnmower. Let's get this in the ultrasonic cleaner anyway. Let's take the pin out. And the needle valve, the float, and all of this can go in the ultrasonic cleaner. A splash of degreaser in there. If you haven't got an ultrasonic cleaner, I'd highly recommend getting one for small engine parts. They work an absolute treat, and it works out much cheaper in the long run than using carburettor sprays. And it's worth bearing in mind that carb spray can also be quite damaging to rubber gaskets and seals. And while the ultrasonic cleaner is working away, we can spend a bit of time cleaning up these plastic parts. This carb's actually very clean, but I'm just going to blow some compressed air through all the little ports to make sure they're all clear. I'm just going to get a sewing needle and make sure that this jet is clear.
Oh no, you're going to scratch the brass.
No, I'm not. Shut up. So let's get our needle valve and put it in the float assembly. And then that will go in there. Pin goes through. And I'm just going to make sure that the float is working properly. So as the fuel fills up the bowl, the float will raise and close off the valve to prevent any more fuel coming in. So we can check that by blowing through the inlet where the fuel would come through and lifting this up, and then it should close the valve. And that's working correctly. So let's put the bowl back on. So the starter recoil is actually riveted on to this metal case. So I'm going to drill those rivets out, take this one off. We've got a brand new one here, and then we'll rivet that back on. Now I'm just going to get my screwdriver and lever this off. There we go. Oh dear, that flywheel looks in a pretty sorry state, doesn't it? I'm just going to use a wire wheel on the grinder to clean this up and try and get rid of as much of the rust as possible. I use Vactan rust converter, it's really good stuff. So I'm just going to paint the back of this with our rust converter. And any rust that's living there will be converted into a black paintable substance. There we go. Just need to remove the rest of these rivets. I then paint the parts with an oil and petrol resistant VHT paint, so it's for very high temperatures, ideal for engines. I haven't actually got any rivets at the moment, so I'm going to be using these little M5 nuts and bolts. And I've got some M5 nylock nuts to prevent them vibrating loose.
Half job, you should have painted the inside.
Well, I didn't, did I? Because you don't see that bit. I want to jet wash off the rest of the engine, so I'm just going to avoid this area where the inlet is and the oil breather pipe. I'm going to put some tissue in there just to make sure that no water gets inside the engine. And then I'm going to use my toothbrush just to agitate all the dirt. So we can take these out now, and then we'll try and take this one out carefully. There we go. Now the governor arm at the back of the lawnmower here is actually seized, so we need to try and free that off. So let's put plenty of WD-40 there. And there we go. Give it a little wiggle, back and forth. We'll try and free it up. Let's get our carburettor back on. So that just goes through there, that on there, and it's got an O-ring that sits behind the carb on this side, and then we've got a gasket on the front. We need to keep exercising this linkage here. It has freed up now, the governor arm, so this little rubber boot goes on the oil breather pipe. Let's just check to make sure it's got a bit of oil in it. Perfect. So a quick way to tell if we're getting a spark is to spray a bit of brake cleaner in directly in the carb, straight in the engine, turn it over, and it should give us a cough at least. We can use our spark plug tester. We'll put that into the spark plug lead there and attach the other end onto the spark plug. Now when we turn the engine over, if this flashes, it means that our ignition coil is working properly and we should be getting a spark. So let's turn the engine over and see what we get. Can't actually see it flashing. It's quite rusty inside here, and that could be causing our problem. I'm just going to check the compression, so I'm going to put my thumb over the hole where the spark plug goes, and I shouldn't be able to keep my thumb on it if the compression's good. Pretty good to me. Our carburettor is nice and clean and our compression is good, so that does narrow it down to an ignition problem. I'll be revisiting this later on in the video, so stay tuned for that if you want to find out exactly what the problem is with this lawnmower. But first of all, let's put the engine back together and get the deck sorted out, make it look a bit more presentable. To secure the fuel tank back on, you've got this long bolt here and a rubber or plastic separator which goes between the tank and the engine, so you have to try and feed that through. Secure the fuel hose to the carburettor, and we can refit our filter housing, so make sure the oil breather pipe goes on there on the back. I love putting shiny new parts on. Look at that. It's much better. Let's put the cover back on. I disconnect the engine kill switch cable and then remove the handles. It's a 14mm socket. And I'm going to lock the blade against that, and then we should be able to loosen off the blade nice and easily. Unless it's had a new blade, this mower's had very light usage because this is in very good condition. It's got a few nicks out of it there, but I'm going to sharpen this anyway And now we need to try and get this plate off. So that's going to be tricky. Now there's no chance of getting this off easily, so I'm going to make a tool for removing these friction plates. I've got this nice thick piece of stainless here which I'm going to be using as my new friction plate puller. So I'm going to cut it down to here.
No guard on the grinder. You're using a cutting disc for grinding.
Now I'm going to drill and tap a hole in the centre of this piece. That's good. We're going to go for our centre hole being right there. We have one hole there and one hole there. Let's get our centre punch and tap out exactly where these are going. One there, there, and one there. I'm going to drill this out a little bit bigger and then tap it to take an M8 bolt. So I'm going to drill it out to 7mm. Now I've got my 8mm tap. Right, we've got a couple more holes to drill out here. Perfect. Do the same with the other one. Okay, let's give it a whirl. Put some nuts on here. Okay, I've opened up these outside holes a little bit more now. Let's bolt that down. Hasn't quite got us all the way off, but we're almost there. Okay, I've got an idea. Let's take this off. I remove the first two nuts that I put on and then bolt the tool directly to the friction plate, and that will allow you to remove the plate a little bit further. Alternatively, you could just get a longer bolt to go through the middle. There we go, finally. So I've got some Hammerite Smooth Dark Green, and that looks very similar to the Hayter Green. So let's give it a first coat. I'm going to give that about 10-15 minutes just to flash dry now, and then we can give it a second coat. Okay, so I need to repair this grass bag. I could get a new one, but they're actually very expensive, believe it or not. So I'm just going to try and repair this one. The sides are solid, but the top is broken here. So what I plan on doing is getting some of this material, which is actually an old car seat cover, and I'm going to cut a piece of this out and then sew it onto the grass bag using some fishing line. I've stitched up around here, and I've just got to stitch up this side now. That's our deck painted up, so let's begin rebuilding this lawnmower. So this piece here goes in there. And then we have the spring, and then this slots over the top. Okay, now this can go back on, and I've got to try and work out how these springs go. Pop the engine on. Before putting the friction plate back on, I'm just going to clean up my shaft. So a bit of WD-40. That's just in case we have to take it off again. We want it to slide off nice and easy next time. Really light smear of anti-seize compound. Just put a little bit of that on the shaft so that it makes removing it next time easier if ever you have to take that off again. So this is our engine cut-off cable, and that will go through there, like that. And here I have a brand new spark plug for it, so hopefully that should give us the best chance of getting this engine started. Swap that out with a brand new one. nick it up.
I stripped the lawnmower back down and tested the ignition coil on the primary and secondary windings, and because the ignition coil was so rusty I was getting really poor readings, so I thought it'd be best to take the ignition coil off, give it a sandblast to get rid of any of the surface rust, and then refit it and see what happens. If you don't have access to a sandblasting machine, you could try and remove the rust using a wire wheel attachment on a Dremel, for example, or on a grinder if you don't have a Dremel.
Okay, I've cleaned up the ignition coil, and now I just want to clean up where it contacts the engine, so it's got a good connection. Let's clean up those lugs with a bit of sandpaper. And now we can fit our nice clean ignition coil. So let's plug it in. And then that goes on there. But we need to make sure we've got a space in between. So I'm going to use some playing cards for that. So let's put them there. And them there. Now we can slide the cards out and we should have a nice little space between the flywheel and the ignition coil. Prime it. So after giving that ignition coil a bit of love, we've managed to get it started, which is really good news.
Because I had the lawnmower on its side, it's a little bit smoky when running, so I took it outside just to burn off any of that oil around the exhaust area. After about a minute of running, the engine had burnt off that residual oil, so it stopped smoking, and we had a nice clean burning engine. I reused the original sticker by mounting it on some double-sided tape. I then cut around a shape, peeled the backing off and stuck it on the lawnmower.
There we go, I finished with the test cut and I'm really pleased with how this lawnmower performed. We had a lovely clean cut, the blade's nice and sharp, the engine runs smooth, and it's really easy to start. Now I hope you found value in this video. If you did, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel if you're not already subscribed. And if you click that alarm bell, you'll get notifications when I post new videos. I have got loads of different videos on this channel. It's more of a variety channel where I just post bits and bobs of my life, really, things that I'm up to, projects, DIY fixes, travel, van build series, and there will be plenty more to come. So stay tuned, I've got some exciting videos coming up. Thank you ever so much for watching and supporting the channel. I really appreciate it, and hopefully I see you again soon. Cheers guys, bye for now.